The turkey was still warm on the table when my daughter stood up and said the words I never thought I'd hear in my own home. "Dad, we've made a decision as a family. We think it's time for you to move out." The room went quiet. Outside, snow was falling on the backyard I had shoveled for 31 years. The same backyard where she learned to ride her bike, where her kids used to chase fireflies in July. My son-in-law was looking at his plate. My daughter was looking at me like she was waiting for me to sign something. I was 67 years old. I had just carved the Thanksgiving turkey. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story didn't start that night. It started the way most quiet disasters start, slowly, in the background, while you're busy paying attention to other things. My name is Frank. I spent 34 years as an electrical engineer in Hamilton, Ontario. I worked for the same company, raised 2 kids in the same house on Birchwood Crescent, and watched my wife Carol lose her fight with ovarian cancer the November before all this happened. Carol was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, who made soup from scratch when neighbors were sick, who kept our family together with a kind of patient love I took for granted for most of our marriage. When she died, I don't think any of us knew what we were supposed to do with ourselves. My daughter Vanessa was 43. She lived about 20 minutes away with her husband Keith and their 2 kids, a 15-year-old boy named Theo and a 12-year-old girl they called Pip. My son Oliver was 38 and lived in Calgary. We talked on the phone every couple of weeks. He wasn't there that Thanksgiving. He had his reasons. After Carol died, Vanessa started coming around more. At first I thought it was grief. Hers, mine, both of us finding our footing. She'd bring casseroles. She'd sit at the kitchen table and drink tea, and we'd talk about her mother. It was good, those first few months. It felt like we were rebuilding something. But somewhere around spring, the visits started feeling different. She started asking questions about the house, about my retirement income, about whether I had a will and whether it had been updated since Carol passed. I answered honestly because I trusted her. The house was paid off. We'd finished the mortgage when I was 59. I had my pension from the company, CPP, OAS, and Carol and I had been careful savers our whole lives. We weren't wealthy by any measure, but we were comfortable. The house alone was worth somewhere around $800,000 in today's market, maybe more. Vanessa started suggesting things. Maybe I should downsize. Maybe the house was too much for one person. Maybe it made sense to free up some of that equity now rather than later. I said I wasn't in a hurry. She'd nod and change the subject, and then bring it up again 2 weeks later, a little differently. Keith started joining her on the visits. Keith sold commercial real estate. He was the kind of man who calculated everything before he said it out loud. He once told me over dinner that the best time to sell a house was before sentiment gets in the way. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to say at a dinner table. By summer, they were suggesting I think about a retirement residence. Not a nursing home, they were careful to say. One of those nice newer ones with amenities and social programming. Independent living. Very different from a nursing home, they said. I was 67, in good health, still driving, still doing my own grocery shopping and cooking. I told them I didn't think I needed that yet. Vanessa looked at Keith. Keith looked at his hands. My neighbor Ted, not Ted from the list, my neighbor, a retired teacher named Ted, told me his daughter had done something similar after his wife died. He said, "Frank, be careful. Grief makes you soft. People can tell." I didn't want to believe that about my own daughter. But I started paying attention. I noticed she had started copying herself on emails about my insurance policy. I noticed Keith had offered, very casually, to handle the renewal on my home insurance because he knew a guy. I noticed Vanessa had started talking to my family doctor about my cholesterol and my sleep without telling me she'd called. The doctor mentioned it at my annual checkup. I had never given anyone permission to do that. And then, about 6 weeks before Thanksgiving, Vanessa sat down with me and said she and Keith had consulted a lawyer about power of attorney. She said it was for my own protection. She said it was what Mom would have wanted. I sat very still. I thanked her for her concern. And then I called my own lawyer the next morning. Her name was Sandra, and she had been our family lawyer for 20 years. She handled Carol's estate. She was the kind of person who spoke in plain sentences and didn't charge you for things you didn't need. I explained everything, the questions about the house, the insurance, the doctor, the power of attorney conversation. I laid it out as calmly as I could. Sandra listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Frank, what do you want?" I thought about that for a moment. I want to make sure that whatever I've built goes where Carol and I always intended, I said. And I want to make sure that nobody makes decisions about my life except me. Good, she said. Then let's get to work. Over the next 6 weeks, Sandra and I met 3 times. We updated my will. We established a trust that would hold the house and the majority of my liquid assets. The trust named a professional trustee, not a family member. We put together a document outlining exactly what would need to happen medically and legally before anyone could exercise any kind of authority over my affairs. It was specific. It was airtight. Sandra made sure of that. I didn't tell Vanessa. I didn't tell Oliver. I didn't tell anyone. I put the sealed envelope from Sandra in the inner pocket of my winter coat, and I went to Thanksgiving dinner. Vanessa hosted that year. She had a new dining room table, long, dark wood, the kind that seats 10. Keith's parents were there. Her kids were there. There was a moment, early in the evening, when I walked into that house and smelled the turkey and the garlic mashed potatoes, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Because Carol used to make those potatoes exactly the same way, and I thought maybe I had been wrong about all of it. Maybe I had built something out of nothing. Maybe my daughter was just worried about her father and didn't know how to say it. I wanted to believe that. We ate. Theo talked about his hockey team. Pip showed me something on her phone about a frog that she had found genuinely funny, and I laughed, and it was real. Keith poured wine. His parents talked about their timeshare in Phoenix. The candles burned down slowly, and the table looked warm, and for about an hour and a half I forgot why I'd brought the envelope. And then the plates were cleared, and Keith refilled his glass, and Vanessa folded her hands, and said the thing she had clearly been rehearsing. Dad, we've been doing a lot of thinking since Mom passed. Keith and I have been talking, and we've spoken to a few people, and we think the most responsible thing, for everyone, would be for you to move into Maple Ridge. Maple Ridge was the retirement residence she had been mentioning for months. We found you a unit, she said. It's a 1-bedroom. It's very nice. You'd have your own space, but people around. And it would let us help you with the house. Help me with the house, I said. Manage the sale, Keith said. There it was. We've already talked to a realtor, Vanessa said. She said it like she was confessing something and expected to be forgiven immediately. We just wanted to have numbers ready so you could see it all laid out. The market is really strong right now, and with what we could get for the house, you'd have more than enough to cover Maple Ridge for years, and there would still be. You've already talked to a realtor, I said again. Dad, we're trying to help without telling me. We knew you'd resist. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. We love you. We're trying to do what's right. Keith's parents were very interested in their wine glasses. Theo had gone very still. Pip was looking at me with something that wasn't quite pity. It was more like concern. She was 12 years old, and she was the most honest person in that room. I looked at my daughter's hand on mine. I thought about Carol. I thought about the 31 winters on Birchwood Crescent. I thought about the Thanksgiving 10 years ago when Vanessa had called me at 7 in the morning because Pip had a fever, and they were scared, and I drove over in the dark without even putting on a proper coat. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, and I set Sandra's envelope on the table. I'd like you to open that, I said. Vanessa looked at Keith. Keith looked at the envelope. He picked it up. He opened it. The color left his face first, then Vanessa's. I watched them read. I didn't say anything. The trust document was 23 pages. Sandra had made me a 2-page summary for exactly this moment. It outlined the trust structure, the professional trustee, the explicit conditions under which the property and assets could be accessed, and the clause, Sandra's idea, not mine, but I had agreed immediately, that stated any attempt to pursue power of attorney or legal guardianship by a family member within 5 years, without documented medical necessity, would trigger a review by the trustee and a reallocation of assets to the charitable beneficiaries already named. Carol had always wanted to leave something to the Children's Hospital in Hamilton. We had just never gotten around to formalizing it. Now it was formalized. What is this? Vanessa said. It's my estate plan, I said. When did you? 6 weeks ago. I folded my hands on the table the way she had folded hers. After you told me you'd spoken to a lawyer about power of attorney. Keith set the papers down. He was doing the math. I could see it on his face. He had already done so much math about my house, and now the math had changed entirely. Dad. Vanessa's voice had shifted. The practiced calm was gone. You didn't have to do this. We were trying to help you. I know you believe that, I said. You're punishing us. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm protecting what Carol and I built. I'm making sure it goes where we always said it would go. And I'm making sure that nobody makes decisions about my life until I am genuinely no longer able to make them myself. Which, according to my doctor, is not today. You talk to your doctor about this. It's my health, I said. Theo pushed his chair back from the table and went to the kitchen. Pip stayed. She was watching me carefully. Grandpa, she said, are you going to be okay? Yes, I said. I think I'm going to be just fine. I stood up. I thanked Keith's parents for coming. I told Vanessa the potatoes were wonderful, and I meant it. They really were, nearly exactly like her mother's. Then I put on my coat, and I walked out to my car in the driveway, and I sat there for a moment in the dark before I started the engine. I didn't cry. I had done my crying months ago, in the kitchen, alone, after Carol died. That night in Vanessa's driveway, I just sat quietly with the heater running and the snow coming down, and the feeling, strange and unfamiliar, of having taken care of myself. I called Oliver that night. I had been keeping him out of it deliberately. He was far away, and he had his own life, and I didn't want the family tension to pull him back. But I called him that night and told him everything. He listened for a long time. At the end, he said, Dad, I'm sorry I wasn't paying closer attention. I told him it wasn't his job to pay attention. It was mine. The weeks after Thanksgiving were quiet. Vanessa called twice. The first call was still angry. She said I had blindsided her, that I had made her feel like a criminal, that she'd only been trying to plan ahead. I listened. I told her I heard her. I said that if and when I needed help, I would ask for it, and I asked her to trust that. The second call was different, softer. She said she'd been talking to a therapist. She said she thought some of her urgency after her mother's death had been about her own fear, not about me. She said she didn't know if she could fully explain it yet. I told her I appreciated her telling me. I didn't rush anything. Some things take time to become what they're going to become. Winter came in hard that year. I shoveled the walk myself, which I know Vanessa would have something to say about, but there is a particular satisfaction in doing the thing yourself. I made soup on Sundays. I started going to a woodworking class at the community center in Dundas on Tuesday evenings, something I'd wanted to do for years, and Carol had always encouraged, and I had always postponed. There were 8 of us in the class. The instructor was a retired contractor with very particular opinions about joinery. I learned more about dovetail joints in 6 weeks than I had in 67 years of living. Pip started texting me. Small things. A photo of a frog she'd found in the schoolyard. A question about what kind of wood you'd use for a bookshelf. A complaint about a math assignment that she admitted she actually understood but found boring. I texted back. We had a running joke about frogs. I don't know when that started, but it became one of my favorite things. In February, she asked if she could come over on a Saturday and see what I was working on in the workshop space I'd set up in the garage. I said of course. She spent 3 hours there. She was methodical and curious, and not at all afraid to ask why something worked the way it did. She reminded me of Carol. We made a small box together that afternoon. It wasn't perfect. The corners were a little off, and the lid didn't sit quite flush, but she carried it home like it was something worth carrying. I still live on Birchwood Crescent. The house is mine. The decision about what happens to it will be mine, when the time comes, made clearly and freely without anyone else's calendar in mind. I don't know what things will look like between Vanessa and me in a year or 5 years. I hope for something real. I won't manufacture it. What I know is this. Carol and I spent 41 years making something together. A house, a family, a life that meant something. I am not willing to hand that over out of loneliness or guilt or someone else's timeline. The woodworking class finished its winter session last week. I signed up for the spring one. There are things I still want to make.